Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Yomi. My name is Yomi. I make college, art, and travel related videos. And for today's video, I'm going to be talking about the languages that I've studied. So I've intensely studied 9 languages, and I've self-studied different languages, or maybe when I meet someone, I'll ask them, how do you say this in your language? But I've intensely studied 9 languages. So what does that mean? That means that I've learned the grammar structure, I've learned nouns, I've learned the pronouns like he, me, I, she, they, we. I've learned the pronouns. I've learned how to pluralize nouns. I've learned how to conjugate, how to use past, future, present tense. So I've done that for 9 languages, to different extents, right? And most of these languages I've learned in school. So for me, the easiest way to learn a language has always been through school. Some people can't learn a language through school. It's just not their method. But my method is through school, because you have to do assignments, you have to do homework, you have to go to class every day, you have to study, you have, if you don't study and the teacher calls on you, then you risk looking like an idiot because you don't know the answer. So you want to study. And I've always been one to get good grades, so I'm not one who likes to get bad grades. So to get good grades, you have to study. So it keeps me accountable. So the way for me to learn a language is by taking a class. So most of these languages I've taken in school. So the first language that I started learning was French. My mom had some books from when she learned French in grade school. She took French for many years, so I always wanted to learn French. I always thought of it as romantic, so I asked to borrow her books. So in middle school, I would practice a little bit. And then when it got time to register for classes for 9th grade, for high school, I was in middle school asking telling my parents, okay, I want to take a language next year. My sister really liked taking Spanish, so I knew okay, I think I'll enjoy taking a language too. I would always see her studying for Spanish and practicing, and I decided to take French. And I ended up loving French. And then I decided to take Spanish because my area where I live has so many Spanish speakers. Most of my friends growing up were Latino, so I grew up around the language a lot. I grew up hearing a lot of phrases which maybe I didn't quite know what they meant, but I grew up even knowing how to count from 1 to 40 in Spanish. There are some things that I just knew. So I decided to take Spanish, not because I wanted to, but because there were so many Spanish speakers in my area. So I'm this is useful. So there are many reasons why people learn a language: because they want to, because it's useful, because it's a heritage language, or because they were forced to, they learned it when they were a kid, when they were a baby. So I learned Spanish because I thought it was useful. And I started on Duolingo. I'm if I like it, then I'll continue learning it and I'll take classes. So I ended up liking it, and I took classes in school. So I took 3 years of Spanish in the span of 9 months. I took all the classes online. Then I took 7 years of French. I took 6 years of French. 6 or 7 years of French in the span of 4 years. And then I took 2 French classes in college. And I'm still in college right now. Then I took a semester. I took a semester of Chinese in high school online. And then I took 2 semesters of Chinese, so 2 years basically of Chinese in college. Yeah. And then all the other languages I've also taken in school, or I just learned on my own, which were the other languages all the languages in total are English, which is my native language, French, Spanish, Chinese, Korean, Bislama, Nahuatl, Yoruba, and Maya. So Bislama is a language from Vanuatu, Korea and Chinese are from Asia, French and Spanish are from Europe, Nahuatl and Maya are from Mexico, indigenous languages, and Yoruba is from Africa. It's my first African language, and it's the language of my family, of my paternal side, who speak the language. So why have I learned so many languages? Well, I started with French. I thought it was romantic, always wanted to learn it. But even before that, in 3rd grade, the first language I ever tried to learn was Danish. I don't know why. I don't know why I tried learning Danish. So I found a video on YouTube, and I learned some phrases in Danish, for den har du det and tak, and I still remember them. I don't know why, but for whatever reason I wanted to learn Danish. And my sister tried learning German, so I practiced Danish with videos, and my sister practiced German with videos. And then in 4th grade I tried learning Japanese. I had an anime phase only in 4th grade, and I wrote down all the characters, wrote down the kanji, wrote down the definitions, watched Studio Ghibli movies. And that Japanese phase lasted for a year in 4th grade. Then I started self-studying French, and I took French in high school. And then that's when I started to take languages seriously, like when I was in high school. So I speak each language at a different level of fluency. So English, I speak fluently. All the other languages, I'm still learning. Like French, Spanish, and Bislama, I speak pretty well. But I speak at a high enough level where I can have conversations, I can make my own sentences, I can understand when speakers have different accents or use a different dialect. I can create my own sentences, I can change my own sentences. Yeah. So French, Spanish, and Bislama I speak pretty well, but not fluently. Like within a few sentences of me speaking those languages, you'll know that I'm not a fluent speaker. I'll make grammatical mistakes, but I can still speak it at an advanced level. I can have conversations. I can somewhat have political, economic, developed conversations. And Nahuatl and Chinese, I can create my own sentences. I don't have much practice speaking, but I only took those languages for a short amount of time, but I can create my own sentences. And I still have a lot I need to learn, a lot of vocab. I'm limited in my vocab, but I can speak it at a basic level. And then Yoruba, I just started like 2 weeks ago. And Maya, I started like a month ago, but I still don't have the grammar structure down. Like I don't know much about the grammar. So that language I haven't really studied intensely. I just know a little bit. So the reason why I learned so many languages is, in all honesty, I've become addicted to language learning. I just like learning languages. I like the concept of being able to speak a lot of languages. I like the idea of being able to speak languages that, like, why would I want to know how to speak that language? Like, people ask me, why do you speak that language? Why do you want to learn that language? I just want to learn. So I speak all my languages at different levels of fluency. So I'm not going to say I speak 9 languages. I don't speak 9 languages. I really speak like 4 languages conversationally, and then 2 languages I can speak basically, and the rest I'm still learning. And the reason why I say I speak these languages, even though I'm not fluent, is because growing up, like, I hate when I would hear people say, oh, I would say, do you speak Spanish? And they would say no. And then I'd hear them have a whole conversation in Spanish. You may not be fluent, but you speak the language. Speak means to be able to have conversations. Like, so you speak the language, maybe not to the level that you're comfortable in, but you speak the language. So it's the same with me and like French. Like, I realized, like, if I'm able to have conversations in French, even if I can't understand everything, why do I tell people I don't speak French? It doesn't make any sense. So, like, in all honesty, I speak some languages. I don't know how many. I won't say that I speak, I'll say I speak more than 4 languages, but I'll also say I speak less than 7. So a lot of the languages, I'm still at the beginning phase. I'm at the intermediate phase where I know words, but like it's still a struggle to create my own sentences. So the first thing when learning a language is you have to want to learn the language. Language learning is hard. So if someone tells you you have to take Spanish, but you don't want to take Spanish, you're not going to learn Spanish. You may take Spanish for 5 years. If you don't want to learn, you're not going to learn it. You may have an A in the class, but you're not going to be able to be conversational because you don't have the right attitude. You have to want to learn a language. And I'm not telling you to force yourself to want to learn a language. I'm saying take a language you want to learn. If your school has if your school has French, Spanish, and Italian, but let's say Italian isn't useful in the global context, take Italian because that's the one you want to learn. If you don't want to learn French and your parents are saying take French, but German is at the school and you really want to learn German, German is a better bet for you to be able to speak the language because you want to speak it. Like the languages that I speak, like English, French, and Spanish. I already speak English. French and Spanish, I'm so involved in the culture. I'm so involved in like Latin American culture and French culture, the celebrity culture, the music culture, the music, the songs, the different genres, the history of the countries, the government structures, the pop culture. I'm just so intrigued in those cultures, like Latin American culture, like French culture and Francophone culture, and I've learned so much, and I just want to learn about the culture. So I like listen to the music, so I learned from that. I watched movies, French movies. I learned from that. Like I learned Latin American slang. I learned from that. So if you're intrigued in a culture, if you're intrigued in a language, you'll be able to learn the language. And you won't be able to learn a language in a month. You won't be able to learn a language in a year. Some people can. but most people won't be able to. Like if you speak Spanish and you learn Portuguese, it's very possible that you can learn to speak Portuguese in like 5 months if you're really, really dedicated. And that's because the languages are so similar. But I know many Spanish speakers who took years of Portuguese and they can't speak a lick of Portuguese. Why? If the languages have so many similarities, why can't they speak each other's languages? Because you're not that interested in learning. Because you're not dedicating a lot of time to learning language. And that's just the truth. Like me, I can speak like even a little bit of Portuguese. I've never self-studied Portuguese, but whenever I meet a Portuguese speaker, I'll ask them, how do you say this? I'll ask them, how do you say this? So I can greet in Portuguese. I can like speak Portuguese, like Spanish with the Portuguese accent and like change the conjugations and be able to speak Portuguese a little. Because I want to learn, not because someone's forcing me to. So you have to immerse yourself in the world and want to learn. And know that language learning is hard. Like you can't learn a language in a week. It's hard. I hate it when there are videos of like how to speak Chinese in 10 minutes. You can't learn Chinese in 10 minutes. Chinese is one of those languages that takes like 10 years to master. There are some languages where you'll study for 10 years and you still won't feel confident. There are other languages where you can study in a year and you can feel pretty confident. But those languages where you can study in a year, they have to be pretty similar to your native language, or you have to be so dedicated where you're studying like 6 hours a day, which most people don't have that time. So no, learning a language is hard. It's not easy. You can't practice for 2 minutes a day and expect to be fluent. Like I've learned French for 7 years and I'm still not fluent. Like I can have conversations, but there's still so much I don't know. There's still so many expressions I don't know. And ultimately it comes down to just speaking it every day. Like when I was in France, like overseas France for a week, I learned so much, but it's just like I don't necessarily have the opportunity to speak these languages all the time. So sometimes I become stagnant in language learning, which is fine with me. I still like speaking the languages, I still like texting in the languages, but I'm not going to be fluent in a day. I'm fine. If it takes me 20 years to be fluent in French, so be it. As long as I can still speak it with people, I'm happy. So language learning, I've realized you can connect with so many people from around the world. Like people ask me why I learn these languages that so few people speak. Because I can, because I want to, because it's a passion of mine. Why do you play video games? Why do you play a sport? Because you can, because you want to. And the thing is, like, language learning has helped me so much in situations. It's helped me so much when meeting people. It's helped me so much when just like chatting with people. Like there have been people where like there's been people who I've met who like there's been no one else who they've been able to communicate with, but because I've learned the language, I learned a few sentences, I was able to communicate with them and they were able to have a conversation with someone when they're not able to have conversations with people. Like there's an older Korean man who walks near my area, which I live in the US, and like in the area where I'm in there aren't Korean speakers. So I don't know why. I think maybe he forgot English. But like he'll just go around to people and he'll start speaking in Korean. People who don't speak Korean. So he comes up to me and he's like, 안녕하세요, and he's like says hello in Korean and he starts speaking in Korean. And even though I'm not very good at Korean and I know just some words and phrases, I was able to have a little conversation with him and he was able to speak with someone when he's probably not able to speak with many people. So a lot of times people feel like they're so far away from home, they can't speak with many people. But when you learn their language, like when you learn when you speak to someone in the common language, they'll give you a smile. But when you speak to someone in their native language, they'll give you their world. They won't give you the world, but they'll give you their world. They'll give you their way of thinking. They'll give you their passion. They'll give you their culture. They'll give you everything. They will literally give you everything. So my recommendation for you is learn a language. Like I just started learning Yoruba, but it's been so helpful for me because growing up I didn't know much about my Nigerian culture, and I still don't know so much about my Nigerian culture, but being able to even learn the basics of like the language of my family on my paternal side has just been so healing for me. Like I get to learn, because when you learn a language, you're not just learning the language, but you're also learning the culture. You're learning how people do things. You're learning how people think. You're learning how people act. You're learning their values. Like in some languages, there are different pronouns that you use for elders versus the pronouns that you use for youth. Like in some languages, the respect for elders in language is so important. Like you cannot say this phrase to an elder, you can only say it to youth. If you want to speak to an elder, you have to change the way you say the phrase. And in those languages, they have so much respect for elders. So just through learning the language, you learn These languages have so much respect for elders. It teaches you a lot about the culture. And it teaches you a lot about life. It teaches you about the way that people think, the values that people have. Like for instance, in Latin American culture, you'll hear people call their younger brothers gordo, gordito. Their older sisters, gordita. You'll hear people call their siblings or family members things that you would never dream of calling your sibling in the US. Do I know people who call their siblings ugly? Yes. But most people I know wouldn't call their siblings ugly, would never call their siblings fat, because it's a sensitive topic. But through learning the language of Spanish, you'll realize that there are different countries have different ways of thinking, have different politeness, different ways of being polite. Like being in Latin America, like I could tell you that people will make comments about your weight, they'll make comments about your skin tone, they'll make comments about different things that aren't offensive to them. And you'll learn that through the language. You'll learn what people find offensive, you'll learn what people appreciate, you'll learn, like some languages have so many different words for specific things. Like in like Spanish, in Mexican Spanish, or like in native indigenous languages of Mexico, there are so many different words having to do with corn. And you'll realize that these people really value corn, that corn is really sacred in a lot of these indigenous cultures. Like that's what I learned in Nahuatl. I learned like 20 different words for things having to do with corn. Whereas yes, in English we have so many different words for things having to do with corn too, but in these languages it's just so much more. And you learn how sacred the corn is through these languages. So my tip for you is learn your language. Learn a language you want to learn. Learn a language not that you're being forced to, and also try learning a language of your ancestors, because that will really just reveal so much about your heritage. Will reveal why your parents act the way they act, why your grandparents act the way they act. Even if your parents don't speak the language, it will tell you why they do certain things by learning the language. Like just by learning a little bit of my family's native language, I've learned why the paternal side of my family does certain things that they do. I'm like, okay, this makes so much sense. The language has revealed so much about my family. Like even like, cause for instance in Yoruba, like there are so many different ways to greet people. And in my immediate family, greeting is so important. Like if you don't greet people properly, like people will get offended. And I never understood why growing up, because in my American culture, like greeting isn't that important. Like you could walk by someone on the street and you can say hello. You can also not walk by someone on the street. I mean, you can also walk by someone on the street and not say hello. So greeting is so important in Nigerian culture. There's very specific ways of greeting, like who greets first, how do you greet, what do you say. But in American culture, we don't necessarily have those formalities in greeting. So by learning, like growing up, I didn't know that greeting was important in Nigerian culture, but through learning the language, I've realized greeting is so important. That's why even though my parents don't speak the language, that's why greeting is so important to them. Even though they may not know that's why greeting is important to them, that's where it comes from. Like our family knowing the language way back when is why greeting is important. So you'll learn so much about yourself through learning your family's native language. You'll learn so much about other people through learning those people's native language. You'll learn why they do things they do, why they act the way they act, why they talk the way they talk. So learn a language. Learn a language. It's so important. It's so fun. You get to learn about other people. Do I speak 9 languages? No. Have I studied 9 languages? Yes. Have I studied even more than 9 languages? Yes. I've dabbled in Provençal, which is a language from France. I've also dabbled in some other languages like Portuguese, not formally, but I'll ask people, how do you say this in Portuguese? How do you say this in Portuguese? I've dabbled in lots of different languages. So language learning is important to me. It's just something I love to do. So that's what this video is about. I hope I was able to give you some tips on language learning, and that I also was able to talk about my experience, because it's a huge part of my life now. The reason why I have learned so many languages and why I'm studying so many languages is because I've become addicted. Some of these languages I may never continue in the future. I may never continue with Korean. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll be fluent. Maybe I'll never pick up a Korean language book again. But it's taught me so much about the world. So I really appreciate language learning, and I'll always be grateful. And I'll always be grateful for all the languages that exist in this world, over 6,000 languages. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and talk about your language learning goals and your language learning tips, the languages you want to learn, and just comment down below. Thank you.